Hey guys, welcome back to Post Series. Today we're going to take a look at another demo reel from Vimeo to have another conversation in our Real Talk series. Here we have a reel that's actually pretty well composited. The artist here paid attention to a lot of things, a lot of important things when they put this together, and overall it actually looks pretty good. So let's just finish playing this through and taking a look at some of the ways this was built up. You see they're paying attention to reflection, color correction, very fine and detailed roto. They have some good edges in here. They have a CG integrated object that they're adding, this duck, some paper birds, which look pretty nice. Also paying attention to ambient inclusion, adding in some elements to the sky, and then here to the grass. I'm not 100% sure what was changed with the alley shot. Maybe it was just some tracking. We have a little animation feature here. So this reel is actually looking pretty good. So let's just take a closer look at some of the shots. So what I do want to say is, look at these edges. When the duck is going, walking through the window, they have some really good edge work here that's matching what's happening here in the plate. If you follow my cursor around, you'll see the areas that I'm pointing to. So yeah, this artist paid good attention to this edge softness here when layering that back on top of the duck. They also, if we play this through a little bit more, they added the duck into the reflection here down on the table, which was a really nice and important touch to make it fit in and blend in. And although we know that this duck is not real, the way that it's integrated, it's fitting perfectly into this shot's environment. Now, what I do want to talk about a little bit more, when you're adding in your CG, you do want to pay attention to the saturation values and compare it to the saturation of your plate in the area that it's going around, the area where it's sitting in the plate. Now, let's I did open this file in Nuke. So I wanted to show you guys, when you're checking your composites, you can actually go ahead and bring in an actual saturation node, and you can just, let's view that with this duck. I want to show you guys one cool trick with checking your saturation values. So what you can do, you have the duck here. You can actually increase your saturation. Let's just slowly increase it. And then we can feel more whether that we feel like this duck is too saturated. As we're raising our plate, we see this duck is a lot more saturated than our plate. And actually, if we bring this saturation down, and as we start losing the saturation in our plate, we see that we still have a decent amount of saturation in the duck. So we could bring the saturation of this duck down just a little bit to make it sit in with the plate even a little bit better. But again, this is a greatly composited, even with the saturation a little bit high, it still fits in, this is looking pretty good. So let's keep going with our reel review. Got some camera shake in there. So they did this alley shot again of the duck. The duck with these robotic legs walking through this alley. So we have a little bit of the duck, a little bit up here at the top. And then we have the legs down here. And let's just check the saturation as well of this second shot. Let's look at this area specifically and see how it's sitting in there. So, this is actually sitting in here a little bit better. To get an idea for this metal, we have these metal cars, and we would be paying attention to how this metal is fitting in with some metal from the plate if we had that reference. And then if you adjust your exposure, you can start seeing how the white levels of that metal is fitting with the white levels of the plate. So we have this highlight here. We know that metal's pretty, will get a nice hot reflection. So once you start bringing your gamma down, you want to kind of check how your integrated element is behaving in relation to the plate. So as things are getting darker, is this staying too bright? Is it seeming to fall off just as well as the plate? And that's kind of how you can gauge whether your black and white levels are matching the plate. Let's take a look. We'll keep going through this. So yes, this looks pretty good. They have this sitting in here really well. And when they do their breakdown, here we have the duck walking a little bit more. And in this shot, they went ahead and added the duck's reflection to the water to give it a nice little touch here. If we can see that, let's see if we play this through. Now let's look at this shot. We have these paper birds, which probably are CG renders. And these are looking pretty good. They have the shadows here for the birds. Let's just play it through first. I just want to show you guys a few things that and again, with this duck walking through here, we would also want to, if we were trying to blend it in, we would again check the saturation of our duck compared to the plate. We could use that saturation node. Right away, I can tell that it is a little too saturated if we wanted it to sit in this shot better, but it does look like a rubber duck and it is pretty bright. So it's not standing out too much because they do have the motion blur on there as if it's moving. You know, they have the mats looking really nice. So it's sitting into the shot. Even though the saturation could probably be brought down a little bit, it's still not feeling too, still feeling pretty good in this shot. All the other integration steps that needed to be taken, the defocus and everything, it's all happening. So it looks good. So yeah, let's look at this. And we have these paper birds in here. And the one thing that I was thinking, let's go forward a little bit. We have, so we get a sense of the saturation. We have this red here. We have this green here. And even the sky, we have this blue. The birds do look nice. Now on this shot, I do think it would have been nice to have more saturation in the birds and maybe a little more luminance. And if we pay attention to these shadows, we have some shadows here in the plate that are on the grass. And we do have this shadow here that is on the ground, the pavement area. And the defocus of this shadow, we even can see the shadow has a little bit of a tone. It's kind of a cool tone. It's looking a little blue. And these shadows for the birds are very sharp. So for this shot, I think if we had just defocused these shadows for the birds a little bit more and also maybe adjusted the saturation so they were a little bit brighter, this would have felt a little better. But this shot is also looking pretty good. They have all the elements in there. They do have the shadows. Another thing that we would want to pay attention to, when you can see the shadow, let's play this a little bit more. There's some parts where you can see here, like the shadow, the paper is over the shadow. You would just want to make sure you're checking those edges. I did see a little bit of a white edge in one of these frames when the bird was the bird was sitting inside of its shadow, but I only saw it once, and the rest of these are looking pretty good. So yeah, just a little defocus, a little more saturation, And I think this one is also pretty good. And again, once we watch this breakdown, we will see all of the steps that were taken to create that. There was a lot of compositing steps that are necessary, and this artist did take some of those steps to pull that composite together. Here we have a composite where we can see this statue was placed here in the park, which, you know, there's some camera movement, and I believe they also added this moon element here. So we have some camera movement, and it's really looking like it's sitting right on the ground. And again, we have, for reference, we do have this shadow here. We have some shadows in the grass, so they did soften up this shadow. It maybe could have used a little bit more softening or a little more diffused to have it a little feeling a little more soft, like this shadow has a little bits of variation. There's some darker spots, and then there's some lighter spots. There's some softer areas, and it's kind of like fading out. So that would have been nice, but this looks really good. Again, paying attention to this contact shadow. Here we see this wood is creating a darker shadow. We have these trees back here. Right along the bottom of the tree, we also have this darker shadow. So I think we could have brought this shadow. This sculpture, you know, is not a solid sculpture. It does have a lot of holes in it, but I think we could have brought this contact shadow down just a little tiny bit. And that would also just help it sit in, because we do have some dark blacks here. These black points might actually be too black, but this is whatever the color space of this footage was. And then for the highlights, we have this very bright, hot reflections, and this is metal, so the reflections would be pretty hot. And then we see we have this bright, bright sky. We still want to pay attention to the white levels of our plate compared to the white level of the element that we're adding in. So let's take a look at this in Nuke, and I'll show you guys how you can check your black and white levels in Nuke. Let's check the saturation on these birds. So we were talking about this shot earlier, and I was saying we could still go ahead and bring this saturation to C. So I brought it up a little, and we see this saturation in his hood is pretty saturated. And although the birds, of course, the saturation went up, look at the green in the trees and the green in his hood. So that's why I think the saturation for these birds could have been a little brighter. And just to check, let's see if I just, on one frame, I'll just adjust the saturation of this set of birds here. So let's take a look at how it would look if we did have this saturation a little bit higher. Just quickly on one frame, and let's see if I brought this up. I'll bring that up. One thing I didn't check for this shot is, let's check where my roto is. I didn't check for this shot, the footage is HD. My project settings are not, so my roto probably won't fit until I change that. So let's check, and then let's see, did we bring this up? Let me see if I bring it down. Okay, yeah, we see those birds are changing. So you always have to check to make sure your roto is, where your project is set to the same format as the footage, or your roto is set to the same format as the footage, so that the roto will be in the correct place when you're making it. So let's check. Now let's bring this, okay, so we see here, even with a little slight adjustment in the saturation. Now let's see, I'm going to adjust my saturation from here. This is going to be the one that I use to check and see how things are coming together. Yeah, so these two that I saturated are feeling like they're fitting in with this plate, with the saturation levels of the plate. So that little slight adjustment I only adjusted it a little tiny bit and it makes a little bit of a difference. So it's these little bits of details that help your image come together. And checking the saturation of your integrated element in relation to your plate is one good way that you can and it's you want to look at it as you're pushing the value so you can see how uniform the adjustment is with what you added in the plate. Like everything should be moving uniformly, so the saturation should be increasing kind of at the same value or the same range for everything that's in the plate. So what were we going to look at? We were looking at, I got a little distracted. Let's get back on track here. Okay. So we have this, and I'm feeling like, looking at this, I'm feeling like this metal, the reflections in it are really hot. So what we want to check when we're integrating elements, you can adjust your gain and gamma sliders to check the range to the same thing that we did with the saturation, how we adjusted the saturation just to see how everything was moving. You also can adjust these sliders. So if we bring this one down, we're now bringing down the exposure, and we can see how these highlights are behaving in relation to all the other white points in the plate. So let's take a look. As we're bringing this down, we see that it's still pretty bright, although most of the things in the plate are dark. So we could bring those values down a little bit too. And let's see, I'm just gonna, let me draw another roto over this just to see if I guess I could make it a little bit better. I don't have to be so, what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna try to adjust the white levels of this image to see if we get something that moves a little bit in the same direction with the plate as we are adjusting that gain exposure slider in the viewer settings. So let's check. I'll just try to keep it tight because I don't want to change too many other things, because once I start making the adjustment, it will be maybe a little distracting if we're affecting other parts of the plate. So we have this, and for this I'll just actually, let's see if I just adjust the gain. Okay. See, now we're getting something where we're affecting the sky, but overall we can see how this is now fitting with the rest of the plate, and I probably took it too far. Okay, so yeah, we see that even with this great adjustment that we have, it's still feeling like it's sitting in there. You still feel a sense of the reflection, but it just doesn't seem as bright. So again, you can bring down your exposure and see how things are falling off in relation to the plate. So without this adjustment, we still had a little bit of a bright area. And that might have been fine since it is a reflection, but we can bring it down a little bit more. So that's one way you would check for that. Let's go back to our reel. So overall, things are pretty well composited here. Even the plate has some darks that are too dark, but if that's the plate that we're working with, we'll just keep it. We have some good tracking here. This is really sitting in this environment, aside from these hot white points. And we probably could even adjust some of these darker areas, since we have so many dark values in the plate, just to tie it in a little bit more. Although I'm assuming this is supposed to be like some sort of brushed metal silver, so it wouldn't get too dark. Again, this shot, I wasn't sure exactly what they did with the alley shot. This shot, I'm just, maybe they added some graffiti, or maybe it was just tracking. So this is a pretty cool shot. I guess that was more something creative. So let's take a look at this breakdown. So I guess this guy was added in there. Let's take a look at that. Was he added in there? Okay, I don't know if this guy was already in the shot or if he was added in the shot, but let's take a look if I can figure out based on the way he's sitting in the shot if he was added. He's sitting in there pretty well, so I think he was already in this shot. And then we see some of the steps they took here to sit that duck in there. See, they probably started off with this from CG, and then they adjusted the color. They did the color correction and for the reflection. And then I did see that they added that defocus too for the reflection. And of course, when they're doing the reflection, they're looking at the defocus amount that's already here on the table from the other objects. So they're trying to match that. So that's looking pretty good. And then they adjusted it to the overall defocus, I guess, of the plate. And so here, let's see what we have. Let's just play this through. Also, they had a guy running. So again, look at the steps they're talking about. They adjusted. That's a good idea of some of the things that you want to adjust when you are integrating your composite. Some of the things that they're paying attention to. There's some motion blur on the birds. They did a little clean plating out the people. And then they have some animation type shots that we're not really going to get into. So yeah, overall, pretty good demo reel. A few little tiny touches that could just tie things in a little bit better. But checking your shots in Nuke, checking the gain, the exposure, the gamma, checking the saturation, using your gamma and gain sliders are really important, and they're helpful when you are checking your integrated elements with your plate. So these are all good things. Now that I'm bringing the gain up, I see that there's some sort of matte issue here. Oh wait, that might be my birds. Yeah, so again, we can see that very clearly when I bring my gamma up, so you can also see things like that. But yeah, that was my little extra roto. So there we have it, guys, another episode of Reel Talk. Don't forget that you can definitely send me in your reels and I will review them. In the meantime, I'm just finding reels on Vimeo to go through, just to go over some of the things that you would pay attention to when you're putting your demo reel together.